Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Nessie's Dead. The first episode of Nessie's Dead in 2025.
Yeah.
And as always, we are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. Happy New Year, officially.
Happy New Year.
We had our little New Year episode where you traumatized me with the AI rabbit hole.
I did. It was so bad we had to take a break, like a month-long break. You couldn't handle it.
They just let me into the psych ward.
Yeah. Well, Spencer's back, so we can record now. He's overcome the trauma of AI.
Yeah. Quite literally, the trauma of AI is my life because I have nothing but technical issues. So
that is true.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, we are back. And I am excited to hear what you have in store for me tonight. I hope you're not going to try to terrorize me as I have you.
No, I did think about that. I was like, I know something she's afraid of, and I could go for her too, but...
Oh, I know you did. I was scared you would.
I'm actually going for something that you love.
Oh, well, aren't you sweet?
So,
I don't know why you would be so sweet.
This one's actually inspired. Well, I'm not going to go too much into that yet.
Okay.
So this week's episode is it's going to be along the lines of what we normally talk about, of course, but it is going to be done in a little bit of a different way. It has like two parts to it. It's all in one episode, but it's kind of going to be broken into two segments, I guess.
Okay.
So how I'm going to do it is I'm going to first present true crime cases to you.
Oh, okay.
Now, I have a collection of cases to cover, and I'm not going to tell you how they're all connected, but they're all connected, kind of. I mean, they're not officially connected. It's nothing like a smiley face killer theory or anything like that. It's not like, oh, there's a potential suspect to all of these cases. No, it's not like that, but there is something that does tie them all together. And after I present the cases to you, I will explain what exactly I mean by that.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, me too. Because
very.
I hope it makes sense. Shall we go ahead and take that plunge into this episode?
Let's plunge.
Okay. First off, we're going to talk about the case of Richard Delmer Boyer. Richard Boyer was responsible for the murder of a friend's parents, Francis and Eileen Harbitz. The murder occurred December 7th, 1982 in El Monte, California. He stabbed them to death with 43 total stab wounds between them. Now, he was caught, right away. He was arrested. He was brought in for questioning, and they were actually about to let him go. I don't think they actually had anything officially on him at that time. So they're like, well, I guess you're free to go. And right then, he decides to confess to the murder. He ended up being found guilty, and then by 1991, turns out that he actually had killed another person prior in 1980. That was 75-year-old John Houston Compton. So he confessed that one several years after he had already been arrested, and he was sentenced to death.
Did he confess that while he was in jail then?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
The couple that he murdered in 1982, he confessed right before he was done with questioning. And then the other one from 1980, he confessed after already being arrested, which that is what officially made him a serial killer.
Oh, yeah, because he had 3 people.
That was the third. Now, next, we're going to talk about Daniel Gonzalez. So on September 15th, 2004, 24-year-old Daniel Gonzalez attacked an elderly couple in Portsmouth, England. They defended themselves, and he actually ended up fleeing. So that couple survived, thankfully. However, later that day, he then murdered 73-year-old Mary Harding. He stabbed her in the back and cut her throat, and he did this while wearing a mask. And he actually left the mask at the scene, and that is how they were able to trace him and figure everything out.
What a dumb, all of the DNA and stuff.
They literally did it through DNA. And
wow.
I mean, he was not mentally sound.
Oh, okay.
So that could have been part of everything. Like, he could have honestly thought that he was maybe going to be better at getting away with everything. So he was leaving stuff behind, at which we have seen killers do.
Yeah.
Or he maybe was just, I mean, obviously if you're a killer, you're mentally unwell anyway, but he was like,
He had some extra issues.
yeah, he was a little bit different in terms of not being mentally sound, which I'll get into, of course. But on September 17th of that same year, he killed Kevin Malloy in North London by stabbing him in the face, neck, and chest. On that same day, he murdered Derek and Jean Robinson, also in North London, also stabbing them in the throat.
He just went on a spree?
Yes. All happened in 48 hours.
It was terrifying.
Now, when he was arrested, he was found outside of the Robinsons' home, running around naked and covered in blood. And he tried to bite himself to death. I can't even imagine what that, like, I don't know what that means. Like, I get it, you're trying to bite yourself, but how would you kill yourself through biting?
Maybe he was going for his wrists. Oh, that makes me like cringe.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's the only way I could think. Oh, I just got a visual of that, and that's horrifying.
Well, he was convicted of murder, and he was placed in the Broadmoor High Security Hospital, where he ended up taking his own life in 2007.
Nobody was watching him?
I don't know. I guess not. I'm not sure around the details of the suicide, but he was writing letters to himself about his experiences. I don't remember exactly, or I wasn't totally sure if he was writing letters while doing the killing spree, he was writing the letters to himself, or if it was after he got caught, or both. But in the letters, he's referring to himself as Zippy. And his mother had actually been writing to Member of Parliament explaining all these difficulties that she had been having with getting him proper medical treatment. And at one point, she even said in a letter, "What does my son need to do to get medical treatment? Kill someone?" Sadly, that was what happened for him to actually get any kind of treatment at all.
So they put him in like an asylum?
Yeah.
Or just, okay.
Well, I think so, because it's referred to as a high security hospital.
Yeah. So it's like the kind of like prison asylum kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, next, we have Nathaniel White. Nathaniel White was a serial killer who confessed to the murder of officially 6 women. However, he did kill 7. Those victims are 29-year-old Juliana Frank, 14-year-old Christine M. Klebe, 34-year-old Lorette Huggins Revlier. And then these next 2, we don't have their ages, but Angelina Hopkins and Brenda L. Whiteside, and 27-year-old Adrienne M. Hunter. His crimes spanned between March of 1991 up to July 1992, and it all began March 1991 when he abducted a 16-year-old girl. He got arrested for it, and then he ended up getting out of jail. Afterwards, he confessed to her murder, but there was like some loophole and they weren't able to go after him or something. So officially it's documented that he murdered 6, but he murdered 7, which that was very confusing in the research. I was like, I've never, like, that's, like, he killed 7. Like, why isn't it reported as 7?
They just let him go, though?
Technically? Well, I mean, he ended up going to jail for the other ones.
Yeah.
But it came out after he had already been put in jail for the 6 that he had done that first one in 1991.
Gotcha.
Then next we have Patricia Frazier. So February 2nd, 1980, 4-year-old Kunji Wilson was found dead in her mother, Patricia Frazier's car. Patricia had actually murdered her own daughter.
That's the worst.
Yeah, those are always really hard.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you know, like anything with a kid, but specifically I think when the kid's parent is the one who did it. Patricia had struggled mentally for quite some time and had actually been institutionalized 4 years before the brutal murder of her own daughter. But what happened was she actually cut out her daughter's heart, believing that she was saving herself and the world from demons.
Oh, she lost her mind.
Yeah, very much so. Now, she was found not guilty for this crime, but that was because she was found clinically insane and was placed into a psychiatric facility. But that one actually, I forgot to mention, took place in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised I never heard of that.
I know, I was shocked too. Now, next we have Mario Padilla and Samuel Ramirez. 17-year-old Mario Padilla convinced his 14-year-old cousin, Samuel Ramirez, to help him murder his mother, Gina Castillo, in 1997. 14-year-old Samuel held her down while 17-year-old Mario stabbed her to death. Now, I know that one sounds really short, but we're on to the next one already for now.
That one was short.
Now, the next one we have is the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. In Pocatello, Idaho, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was stabbed to death September 22nd, 2006 by her classmates Brian Draper and Tori Adamsick. Her body was found 2 days later when her family arrived home from a vacation, and the boys were arrested and sentenced to life without parole in 2007.
Oh, so that's not that long ago.
No, that one's, I mean, technically, yeah, I still feel like 2000s was
yesterday.
years ago. But
I know, I'm like, oh, that's like 5 years ago. No, honey. 25 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So next and last we have Alan Menzies. Swedish man Alan Menzies murdered his best friend Thomas McKendrick by hitting him 10 times in the head with a hammer. Yeah, that's another crazy way to go.
I know.
Then afterwards, he stabbed him 42 times with a Bowie knife.
The 10 times wasn't enough?
No. Yeah, it's like you're already, I assume 10 hits in the head with a hammer, you're probably already dead.
Oh, yeah. Just seems like rage.
Yeah. It was definitely a rage incident.
I would hate anything where it's like a blunt force to the head.
I don't even like that term.
Blunt force. It just makes me think like you're probably going to hear like the cracking of your skull.
Yeah, and I mean, and you might not be dead at first.
Oh, no. Probably not.
Like stabbing, like a lot of stabbings, you like bleed out or go into shock and like live through the pain for a few minutes or something. Like, put me in front of a bus if you're going to murder me.
Yeah, I feel like the cracking, like, I couldn't.
We talked about that in the Phantom Killer episode.
Yeah.
For any of you who have not yet listened to that one, please go back and listen to it. Thank you.
That's a great one.
It is.
Fabulous.
Thank you. Those are all the cases that we're going to cover today.
Okay. Seem like such short little clips that you're giving us here. So I'm kind of curious on how you're going to pull it all together and give us the full picture.
So those are the ones I want to like really go into, but there are a few more that I kind of have in my back pocket that I am going to address. They're kind of like bonus pieces, I guess. But let's go ahead and revisit each case and discuss what it is that ties them all together.
A mystery.
And I'm not going to tell you quite yet what exactly it is.
Okay.
I'm going to let you see. I'm going to kind of see if you figure it out, actually. So this is kind of a game type of, or not game, but this is like, I don't know, a different approach.
Let's hope I'm smart enough.
Yeah.
I was like, you explain it, and I'm like, I still don't get it. And you're like, oh my God, we're scratching this episode.
You'll get it right away.
Okay.
You'll get it.
Okay, let's hope I'm smart enough.
But first, before I go into the further details in each case, I want to tell you that this episode came to mind for me because of a recent interest that I have personally developed. It's not murder, like killing is not my interest or anything like that, but...
Horror movies.
Yes. You guessed it already.
Really? Was that quick?
Yeah.
I'm so smart.
So, let's go back and revisit everything.
Okay.
First up, again, we have the case of Richard Delmer Boyer. He was the one, he murdered 3 people. He killed the couple in 1982 and the elderly man in 1980. Now, the murder of the elderly couple was actually inspired by the 1981 film Halloween 2. He explained that he was experiencing hallucinations from the movie and that he would watch it under the influence of drugs, and it led to him committing the murder. And while he was in court, he actually tried to defend himself by saying he had no responsibility, like he was not at fault.
He tried to throw Halloween 2 under the bus?
Yes, because he said it inspired him and caused him to have these hallucinations that made him feel, I guess, like he was in the movie and that he had to commit these crimes.
I'm sorry, sir. That was the drugs.
Yeah. There was another murder inspired by the Halloween franchise. It was from Halloween, the one that was done in 2017 by Rob Zombie.
Uh-huh.
And I think 17-year-old Jake Evans murdered someone, and it was inspired by that movie. I think he murdered, like, his family. He murdered, like, a handful, like, more than one people, and he said that because he saw how easy it was to murder in that particular movie, and it gave him the idea to do it.
Yeah, because it's a movie. It's never that easy in life.
Well, that's what he also kind of explained. Next, we have Daniel Gonzalez. This was actually inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th.
A combo.
Yeah. Quick refresher, Daniel Gonzalez was the one who went on a killing spree between September 15th and September 17th in 2004, and he was arrested outside one of the victims' homes, naked, covered in blood, and he tried to bite himself to death. So he was, like, really into Nightmare on Elm and Friday the 13th. And in those letters that I was talking about where he would refer to himself as Zippy, he was going on and explaining how he intended to become this, like, the most famous serial killer. He would compare himself to Freddy Krueger. And he also explained that he wanted to just, like, when they asked why he killed, he's like, I just wanted to know what it's like to be Freddy Krueger, you know? That mask that he was wearing, that he left behind.
It was a Freddy Krueger mask.
No, it was a hockey mask. It was
Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that was where Friday comes into play.
But they all seem like they have some kind of mental illness as well, or just a couple of them? Yeah. Outside of murdering people, of course. Well,
yeah, outside of the obvious. I would agree. I think there is a very strong theme of mental illness. I think that they had just the right combo of a certain mental issue that got triggered because of the film, perhaps. Especially the ones that were, like, obsessed with a certain film, which there are others that we will get into in regards to that.
Okay.
But next we have Nathaniel White. He was the one who documented 6 victims, but it was actually 7, and that was in the early 90s. So he was actually inspired by, and I know this is not necessarily considered a horror film, but it's a sci-fi movie, but I feel like it goes along the same lines of everything else that we're talking about. But he was inspired by RoboCop 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was like, when I saw that, I was like...
RoboCop
2, the second one.
Oh, 2.
Yeah.
Let's make it clear.
Yeah, that's the one that he was inspired by officially. Now, he actually explained that, quote, the first girl I killed was from a RoboCop movie. I seen him cut somebody's throat, then take the knife and slit down the chest to the stomach and left the body in a certain position.
RoboCop did this? I haven't seen this RoboCop 2, so...
No, me either.
Oh, gosh. I didn't know RoboCop went so hard. Okay, RoboCop.
No. And then he continued on saying, with the first person I killed, I did exactly what I saw in the movie. End quote. So he literally did, like, copy and paste of what he saw in the film.
Yeah.
The others were kind of loosely inspired. Like, Daniel Gonzalez wanted to be like Freddy Krueger and like Jason. And the other, Richard Delmer Boyer, was having hallucinations in regards to Halloween 2.
Well, that's his own fault.
Yeah. Now next we have Patricia Frazier, the Wichita Falls woman who in 1980 killed her own daughter because she wanted to save herself and the world from demons. Do you have an idea?
I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm waiting to hear what movie could have inspired this.
First, I'll say what exactly happened. So she believed that, so she was also hallucinating.
Was she on drugs or just not?
No, just unwell. Now, she was hallucinating and believed that she saw grass growing out from her daughter's chest. She also felt that or believed that there was some kind of spirit that was talking to her, telling her that she had to kill her daughter to save herself and the world from demons. Now, 10 days before this happened, she watched The Exorcist.
Oh, no. That movie is still to this day terrifying. We'll say it is a slow burn. And then when you finally get to like the meat and potatoes, I still find The Exorcist pretty. It's up there.
That's so weird because I can't.
Have you seen
imagine
it?
Seeing me, no.
Oh, okay.
It's on my list.
Yeah, I think once you see it, you'll get what the hype is. Even to this day, for it to be as popular as it still is, it does get you when it gets to that point. But like I said, it's going to be a slow burn there for, I'd say, a good hour into the movie.
No, I can't do that.
Yes, you can. It's not a slow burn as in like you're like, oh my god,
Maybe
like
if
it's a good
like,
movie.
Hanging out, like if I'm at your house and we got popcorn and we're chatting while it's like, slow or something, I can.
But the hour part is still like it's good content. Like it's gonna keep you watching. It's just everything that you expect from The Exorcist is gonna be like right boom, and it's Oh, so this lady must have been really mentally.
Yeah, well, remember, she was actually institutionalized 4 years before this happened.
She should not have been watching that film.
No. Now, next we have Mario Padilla and Samuel Ramirez, who killed Gina Castillo, who was the mother of Mario. Now, the two explained, after they were arrested, that they were inspired by the movie Scream and Scream 2. Which I'm literally, maybe this is tasteless to say right now, but I'm literally wearing a Scream t-shirt.
Oh, me too. And Scream slippers.
But we are not inspired to do that.
No.
We want like merchandise and watch the movie. They wanted to live it.
We're mentally stable.
Yeah.
We understand that is entertainment, and it's kind of an escape in a way, but it's not an escape that you take it and be like, oh, I'm going to
escape into that reality.
Yeah, into the real world. Yeah, no.
Now, these two boys, they planned on stealing money from Gina Castilla and using it to then fund a killing spree. A part of funding that killing spree was going towards a ghost face costume and a voice changer, just like in the movie. They wanted to recreate it.
They didn't have Spirit Halloween money.
They probably didn't have jobs.
They didn't have $25.
No, and I think they also, from my understanding of it, was they needed more than just knives. They needed more than just the costume and the voice changer. I think they also needed to like get a car and go on the run. And
they were planning like a whole thing.
That's what I assume when I was doing the research and they wanted to do a killing spree. That's kind of what I thought. Because I thought, why do you need all this money for it?
Yeah, especially because in the 90s, it was probably like $25 for the costume and voice changer.
Yeah.
I don't see murdering somebody over. You could just take that out of a wallet or a pocketbook or forge a check.
Yeah. Now, the case was actually not allowed to be considered connected to the movies, according to the presiding judge, John Cherowski. However, psychologist Madeline Levine stated, quote, there were a whole bunch of reasons why they acted out that way. But did the movie provide a blueprint? Absolutely. End quote.
Well, if they're wanting to do a whole killing spree, I wonder if they also knew that the movies were inspired by the Gainesville Ripper.
Yeah, I do really wonder that. And it's interesting because you covered the Gainesville Ripper, which for anyone who hasn't listened, go listen to that one.
That damn screwdriver.
Yeah. So mad about that one. But that case, the case of the Gainesville Ripper, inspired the movie. And here we are. I'm covering a case or covering an episode now where I'm doing movies that inspired crime cases.
Yeah. I wonder if was a mix though. If they were so obsessed with the movie and then realized it was based on an actual.
Well, what's really weird, because the next one is also Scream related,
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have more Scream cases. That's actually how
Oh,
I got the idea for this episode. Fun fact for all our super fans out there. I I found all of these cases that happened after Scream, like cases that were inspired by Scream. And I was like, what on earth? Like, why did Scream have this effect on people? And I thought, okay, I'm gonna cover that. But then I thought, well, if Scream had an effect like this on people,
yeah.
I'm sure other films have as well. Now, not to the same extent as Scream. Scream has definitely the most,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is
I'll let you go through those because I kind of have a theory to why, but I'll let you
okay. I kind
cover
of do too.
everything.
And that will definitely come up in the next segment of this episode. But let's go ahead and talk about the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddard. She was the 16-year-old girl, and her two classmates had snuck into the house and stabbed her to death. So the perpetrators snuck into the house through the basement while adorned in masks and dark clothing. They used knives that they purchased at a local pawn shop, and they stabbed her 35 times. And during the investigation, police actually found videotapes of the boys detailing a plan to murder Cassie, along with a bunch of other classmates.
Oh, I know this case now.
Yeah, this one was pretty big actually.
Yeah, because I was like, this rings familiar. And as you're going into the details, I think they even made like a found footage film
Yeah, that was
based
their
off of this.
plan. They were creating a documentary
Yeah,
of film based on their plans to kill and then to actually do it,
yeah.
which is really interesting because this occurred in 2006. And in 2011, Scream 4, that was the concept of Scream 4.
Oh,
And I'm wondering now if maybe they got the inspiration from this real life case that was inspired by Scream, which I
Scream's
hope
just taking
not.
another case.
Perhaps, but see, that's exactly why I'm like, is that why? Could that be it?
I mean, it correlates pretty well.
So let's talk about the last one we have. That was Alan Menzies, the Swedish man who killed his friend by hitting him in the head with a hammer and then stabbing him
Oh, you
40
can skip those parts. We got it.
stabbed him 42 times.
Ugh,
Now he was actually obsessed with the movie Queen of the Damned.
I love that movie.
So he was actually obsessed with vampirism. He himself wanted to become a real life vampire. He actually believed that the main character from that movie, Queen Akasha, was speaking to him and telling him what to do. This best friend of his, Thomas McKendrick, made some kind of, I guess, insulting type of comment about the character that just set him off. So he killed him.
It's
But
so bizarre because it's this distance of reality of like,
mhm,
there's really got to be something mentally wrong if you think that the actor and everything that's going on, that that's real enough that they're speaking to you and
yeah,
talking to you. And
and that this movie is going to help you become a vampire.
yeah, that's so
Well,
bizarre to me. Like, I can get it with music and musicians, how people can get wrapped up and like obsessed with that.
oh, literally me and Gaga.
Yeah. But for a movie or a TV show, it's there's so much that's going on in between, and they're reading lines and they're cut
Hmm.
and redoing this. That blows my mind that somebody took that and was like, "Oh no, this is real," and she speaks to me. Like
Yeah.
Aaliyah was definitely not speaking to you, honey. She was off on her own thing after that for a little bit. Rest in peace.
Well, along with the fact that he killed him with the hammer and then stabbing,
God.
Ben actually proceeded to drink his blood,
No.
and then he ate part of his head, and he then dragged the body out into the woods where he buried it, and then was caught. And when he was caught, the police actually found uh, all of these, I think, books and documents about vampirism. When he was arrested, he wasn't like trying to lie about anything. He was saying all of this, like, "Oh, she's talking to me," and oh, blah blah blah. And he also said that he knew he was going to have to murder someone before he could actually turn into a real vampire. So this was kind of, I don't want to say it was premeditated, but I
Oh,
think
I
he
feel like it
intended to
sounds
murder someone.
premeditated. Maybe not pre.
Well, not with this particular person,
Yeah, that's what
but
I meant.
he planned to commit a murder anyway.
Mm-hmm. And then this guy just pissed him off, and he was like, "That's the one."
Because he went for
His
Queen
lady.
Natasha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His obsession.
Now, these cases are all inspired by, in some way or another, horror films
Mm-hmm.
and RoboCop 2.
I forgot about in RoboCop 2.
Yeah. As we were talking earlier, I did kind of want to mention a few more that were inspired by Scream. In January 1999, Ashley Murray was stabbed and then left for dead by her friends Daniel Gill and Robert Fuller. And they actually were dubbed the Scream Attackers. They had watched the movie before the attack, and they found like all these drawings of Ghostface. They actually, when people brought the fact up that the movie was kind of an inspiration, it ended up kind of being dropped because they ended up blaming it on the use of drugs and black magic. But Scream was their inspiration to the attempted murder of Ashley Murray.
Well, maybe because they were watching Scream while on drugs.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And in May of 1999, the media was scrutinizing violence in pop culture and whatnot, and they were putting blame on the Scream movies for the Columbine shooting.
Yeah, I don't see those correlating because those guys, they had their own agenda. And from what I remember, a lot of what they were doing was something different.
There was something, I think one of the guys had an interest in Scream, but from what I read, it didn't seem like he was like obsessed. They were obsessed with other things.
Yeah, they were.
It didn't seem like Scream was like a basis of that at all.
No. I could see them probably being fans of the movie, especially because it was newer. But I feel like they had a different agenda when it came to that.
Now, in November 2001, Thierry Jaredin murdered Alison Campbell while in a Ghostface costume. He did this because she rejected him, actually, and he said he did it because he was inspired by the movie Scream. And then in 2002, 17-year-old Julian killed a female student. I only know the first name, Julian, but he did this right after he showed her his ghost face mask. Then also in January 2022, Logan Smith strangled a random jogger, and he did this right after he was watching Scream. He wanted to take the corpse home and keep it.
Oh, no, honey.
Inspiration behind that, I guess.
Oh, no.
So I found that very odd that Scream had so much, but I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit more before we kind of dive into the rest. So this will now take us into the next part, and that is the psychology of horror. Because, I mean, as you know, I've always been into horror and the macabre. Not scary movies, though.
No. When I first met you, I was like, have you seen this? And you're like, oh, no, I don't watch those. And I'm like,
no.
What?
And people are always like, it's so weird. You love all things spooky, but you don't want to watch a scary movie.
Yeah.
But now I do. Like, now I get it, and I really enjoy them. Specifically slashers for me. I know you're the queen of horror.
Yeah, and it was so weird because I always wanted to invite you over to movie night, and you were like, as long as you guys aren't watching a scary movie, and I'm like, that's what movie night is, hon. That's what we'll be doing. You were like, no, I'm good.
But I've always wondered why I'm drawn to spooky stuff and why I find a slasher film so intriguing and so relaxing. And I know you are you really are that way. You love all things scary.
It's weird because I work at home, so I usually always have like a movie playing while I'm emailing and doing this and that. So I probably say maybe 2 or 3 movies go through the day that I'm not participating in like watching. But I'm getting a synopsis of what's going on here and there, but it's always going on in the background. And then at nighttime, of course, when I'm relaxing, I'll be like, okay, now I want to find a good one that I'm actually going to sit and watch and relax. And I feel like things don't really scare me anymore unless it's like, I watched one last night and I will never watch it again. It's called The Coffee Table.
Was it too scary or?
It wasn't even, I feel like I'm in the point like slashers don't scare me. Ghost stories don't scare me. Nothing like that. but it was just this anxiety ridden of why am I watching this, but I cannot turn it off. It's one of those movies that's up there. A quick synopsis: Dad's home alone, baby dies. The whole movie is him hiding it while the wife is there. Their friends are over, and it was just gut sickening. But I just stuck through it.
Is it considered horror, or is that like?
Yeah, it's considered a horror movie. I don't understand. I feel like horror is starting to go to that point to where things just aren't scary. And then you got like the Terrifier movies. They're so over the top with the gore and the kill scenes. And for most horror fans, we're like, that was a pretty cool kill scene. So I don't understand. So I'm interested in what you have on the psychology behind it as someone who watches like literally all day, all the time.
Yeah. Or as for people like us who also put on a true crime case.
Yeah, because the information that we have to dive into, it's not easy.
No. And there's so many people who are like researching this crime case all night long. Doesn't that like keep you up? And I'm like, no. But to other people it would. And I have some friends who hate nothing spooky.
Yeah.
Halloween, no. Addams Family, no. That's too scary. And all this stuff relaxes me. And I'm like, why is it that I enjoy it and this person doesn't? And vice versa. And I'm sure they're thinking, why does this crazy person, why are they wearing a ghost face t-shirt?
Yeah, because every time I do meet a person, I'm like, you don't like this or you don't, and they're like, absolutely not. I'm like, I can't understand you. And I'm like, I'll try to convince them to watch something. I'm like, it's really not that scary. It's not. It's a good lead way. And they're like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. I'm like, oh, it's interesting.
It's very interesting. First, I want to kind of go into continuing on with the horror movies, the history of horror in the film industry, and the way that it's kind of blown up over the past century. Now, before I get into that, though, in case anyone was wondering, Oxford Languages actually describes horror as an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. While doing this research, something that I never thought of until I was reading about it is what is referred to as the paradox of horror. And that is the fact that it doesn't necessarily make sense biologically for us to be drawn to something that scares us. And we are actually the only species on Earth to do it. That that never occurred to me. There aren't, wild animals aren't out in the woods seeking out the predator so that they can get an adrenaline rush out of it like we do at a haunted house,
Yeah.
And
you don't see the squirrel getting up in the tree to see the cat attacking its friend or attacking another squirrel. Well, it wouldn't be its friend. They're squirrels. You know what I mean? The squirrel's not like, oh, we all got to watch this. Everybody get up here.
Yeah, they want to avoid it. They don't care. And once the terrifying experience is done, they shake it off and go about the rest of their day.
Yeah, which is why they cross the road 100 million times and stop right when your car gets there, and then they're
squirrels might be a bad example. It's instinctual. When a squirrel crosses the road, notice most of the time it'll kind of stop and then go back where it came from.
Yeah.
The way that their nervous system is designed is to go back to where they came from.
Oh.
Because naturally the predator, they think the car is the predator, right?
Yeah.
And the predator would assume that the squirrel is going to keep heading the direction that it was just heading in. So what the squirrel's body is telling it to do is stop and then go the opposite direction to kind of throw the predator off, which is why, ironically, evolutionarily, it doesn't work because a car is not after the squirrel.
Anyways, back to what we were talking about before we went on squirrel rant.
I know some people who think squirrels are scary, but here's real scary stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that humans having an interest in horror essentially can be traced back to the very earliest of times, where people were discussing spirituality and then into religion and folklore. They're talking about things that were scary, I mean, think of any old folk tales throughout history. Most of them are very scary.
Yeah.
It wasn't one day all these happy trees are going to talk to us. It's no, you go out in the woods and the trees are going to eat you.
Yeah.
Some old fairy tale or something.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards to film, horror was not actually an official genre until after the release of Dracula in 1931. And it was so successful that it led to a slew of horror films that predominantly centered around monsters.
Yeah, our universal monsters. You have your swamp guy and the
Black,
mummy.
I just got a Creature from the Black Lagoon t-shirt.
Oh, really? I
Hmm.
love that. I loved Bela Lugosi. Those were good films.
Hmm. And it's interesting because at that time, from the 30s and into like the late 40s, it was all about, for the most part, monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started to shift in the 1950s from monsters to more science fiction and war kind of themes. By the 1960s, we had the iconic Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho, which is credited as bringing us into the modern horror era.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, that's one of my absolute favorite movies. I love Hitchcock films.
Oh, me too. I used to watch those when I was very, very young.
Okay.
Extremely young. I think I saw Psycho when I was maybe 7.
Probably young for that, yeah.
Oh, I loved it.
Now, alongside that, an increase of eroticism and violence came in 1960s horror, which then led into the 1970s, which really ran with that theme of like extreme violence and eroticism. And then the late 70s gave way to my favorite, slashers, and that really took over the genre. Now, Peeping Tom and Psycho, both of which came out in 1960, are typically credited for birthing the slasher subgenre.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the first slasher films. However, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974 is what really kicked off the like slasher craze.
I feel like that movie for the time period, that was pretty graphic and pretty rough. I
Yeah.
still think to this day, like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre hasn't like aged to where you think you're watching a movie from the 70s.
There's something very weirdly unsettling about that film.
Yeah.
And fun fact, I actually know someone who's related to the original screenwriter.
I know, that's what you were telling me. Ugh, jealous.
Piece of merchandise. Anyway, now in the 21st century, we have seen a rise in themes inspired by torture porn and found footage concepts.
I love found footage. I'm a found footage hoe.
I can't stand it, and that has been the like big trend since the early 2010s. Well, really since the early 2000s, but
well, maybe you haven't watched the right ones.
Maybe. I feel like it just takes, I don't know. The cinematography to me is less interesting. I like something that's a little bit more like bold. Like I think of American Horror Story and remember the first like 3 or 4 seasons had this really intense and very dramatic and kind of weird film style to it. And they would do these really odd cuts and angles and certain scenes would cut randomly. And there was something, it's very artistic. And not to say that found footage style is not artistic or whatever. I don't like it. I don't like it in comedy, like when it's like as if it's a reality show on like The Office. I don't like that. I don't like it.
Oh, I love The Office. Do not come for The
I like
Office.
The Office. I just don't like the film style.
I love it being from a perspective as like you're seeing this footage that these people are making. These friends, they have a camcorder or they're just documenting their life, and it feels to me like I'm watching like a reality show. And I guess maybe because my age group, we were really raised off of reality shows were like the big thing in the early 2000s. And so I think that kind of set in. And so maybe that's why I like found footage so much. I don't like to watch crappy reality shows. I've got a couple in my back pocket I like to watch. But it's not really my thing, but I think it was the whole...
Yeah, I mean, it was ingrained into everything.
Yeah, it blew up so big.
In the early 2010s, everything was focused on like making it seem unintentionally reality style.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like everything was behind the scenes. Because it was like we were kind of done with the whole reality, but we wanted to get the reality style.
Yeah.
So everything was filmed as if you were watching behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why I
Maybe.
fiercely hate found footage style for now. We'll see.
I've got where, like, when I was saying I watch maybe 2 to 3 movies, not really watch, they just kind of play. Tubi knows my algorithm, and it'll just play found footage after found footage after found footage. I've probably seen them all at this point. A lot of them are crappy, and you get shaky camera and stupid stuff to where you're like, I can't even watch this because I can't see what's going on. But a lot of them just feel like you're watching almost a documentary, and that I love.
Yeah.
That's the style I
get the
like.
appeal. And maybe you'll find me one. Find me one that
Yeah.
I like.
There's different styles. There's that shaky, running around crazy that people hate, and they're like, I can't see what's going on. The Blair Witch. That's one of those ones that a lot of people, they can't stand the camera moving around and going this way, and they get dizzy. And then there's the ones that feel like I'm watching a documentary, but I'm not, because it's not true. So I don't feel bad about it. I think it depends on the style.
Probably, yeah. So, with all that being said about horror films, we, as a species, have literally evolved to be drawn to horror. And I feel like that shows with Halloween in America being the second most commercial holiday. And just the fact that, like, every culture has some kind of celebration like Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the horror genre in film is as big as it is, and like haunted houses are huge, and like people are really drawn to this kind of stuff. True crime content is huge.
I would say more recently as well, especially I wouldn't doubt that Halloween doesn't become the number one. Only because I say this.
Better. Halloween has died over the past decade, and over the past like 2 or 3 years,
Yes.
it's resurrected beautifully in a way that I don't think it's hitting kids quite yet. The same way, but I feel like people like around our age, I mean, we're different ages, but you know, like adults, we're starting to like fall back in love with Halloween.
Yeah, because I remember going to the stores, and you'd have like your little spooky community that were talking about an item. Oh, you got to get this item. Oh, this came out. You go and it would be there at the store. No big deal. And then it just kind of seemed like it started to pick up in a way that the majority of people that weren't into the macabre and weren't usually into the spooky stuff were now obsessing about Halloween and having these decor items and how they're going to decorate in this spooky way, and adopting, like, almost being like goth for like the month. And
or even just look at the fact that like the trend of wanting a big titty goth girlfriend.
Yeah.
And, like, that's huge. And like all of my goth female friends, guys come at them in like a kind of fetishy way of like, I want the goth girlfriend.
Exactly.
You know?
It just seems like that culture has now become more widespread. So it's not such a small knit community. Now it's like there's so many people that are like, I'm also obsessed with that. I do this and this. And a lot of them may only do it for the season.
But now that season is big and grand again.
Yeah.
As it should have been.
Exactly. Exactly. Other people like me, though, we celebrate all year, but still.
It's always Halloween here on Nessie's Dead.
It always is.
Now, with all that, we've all kind of, I feel like or the general public is tapping back into our primal nature of being to horror.
We discussed this in the Make Christmas Dark Again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Us doing horror's work. Now, this is kind of a perfect way to transition into discussing psychology around horror. Behavioral scientist Colton Scrivener actually refers to this as a morbid curiosity, which I feel like we've all kind of heard that term. But this is something that we all have to some extent. This is anything from enjoying a haunted house or listening to a true crime podcast like, I don't know, Nessie's Dead.
Nessie's Dead.
But it also can go into something as simple as when you're sitting in traffic and when you're passing the wreck, you look over at it.
Oh, the rubberneck.
The morbid curiosity, and we all do it. Even people who aren't into horror are doing it.
Everyone wants to see what went down.
Yeah. Or your neighbors are fighting, so you go out to the balcony or front door and you listen. Or you're in a restaurant and that couple in the booth across from you is arguing. you can't help but
You
watch.
chew extra softly. You got to hear the whole
Hmm.
drama of what's going on over in that booth. It's like,
Yeah.
shh.
And now all of that is considered morbid curiosity.
Mm.
And it is believed to be a learning mechanism where it's almost like we're subconsciously studying things around us. And it actually helped our ancestors with survival because it helped them figure out potential dangers, but they were doing it safely from afar.
Oh.
And it's like if you can maybe pass that wreck, the way that kind of the primal subconscious mind is operating, pass that wreck and see some terrible thing, it's like, okay, I'm being reminded to drive safe or put on my seatbelt or whatever. And obviously, our ancestors, cavemen, didn't have car accidents to look at, but
Yeah, it was like the
very
primal of like,
tangible.
learn from that mistake. Don't make
Yeah.
that same mistake.
And even if we're not necessarily learning from it, we're drawn to something. On some level, all humans are drawn.
Hmm.
We all have that morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
And that's obviously why horror is as big as it is. Part of it, anyway.
Hmm.
Now, psychologist Glenn D. Walters breaks this horror enjoying experience down with three main factors. The first one being tension. This is done with suspense, terror, shock, anything that breaks the energy and kind of disrupts the situation of supposed safety.
Hmm.
And, even if it's just something as simple as you're watching a scary movie and that girl's walking down the hallway and all of a sudden the music starts to change. All of a sudden you hear those intense violins and you know something's about to happen.
Yeah.
So that first one, tension, is building that fear in the body. Two is relevance. And this is about finding relatability on some level, which does sound kind of confusing because, like, I personally don't relate to being chased in my dreams by Freddy Krueger. There's always some kind of relatability because, like, we have the universal fear of death. Or even if
Yeah.
it's not a direct fear, there is this uncertainty around death. The relatability can relate to things like social issues or psychological stress, and seeing somebody that's struggling in the film and you're like, oh my God, what if that was me? So that's relevance. And the third one is unrealism. Now, this is the fact that we know it is fake, and this is done through cues from production, things like music,
Hmm.
or the certain things within the film, or whatever else, however you're consuming it. It reminds you that you are safe. It reminds you that this is not you. It's not real. You're not the one experiencing this. And it's interesting to me that the first one with tension is done through production mechanisms, and so is the third one, unrealism. It's done through production.
Yeah.
And one of them is used to build up the fear, and the other one's kind of to help bring it back down. And of course, another factor is safety. Because when you're consuming something scary, you're typically in a safer environment than whatever you're consuming. Like
Exactly.
you're in your car listening to a scary podcast, not in the woods being hunted by a monster. Now, sociologist Margie Key explains that the part of the reason that we enjoy horror is the excitation transfer that is coming into play. This is a psychological theory suggesting an emotional response to a particular message or stimulus that can be influenced by remaining arousal from a previous experience. This was proposed by a professor, Dolph Zillman, in the 1970s, and it's explained that when a horror film viewer will feel the fear kicks in, on some level you're feeling that fight or flight mode in your body because the mind knows you're watching a scary movie. The body does not. The body just registers the fear. There's some kind of fight or flight that is happening within the nervous system. Even just something as simple as seeing someone, be with their head cut off because it's a scary sight. And so the body starts to feel that sense of fear, the anxiety. But then once you see that, I don't know, that girl, the final girl, survives at the end of the movie, or the cops catch the killer, or the monster is just a figment of your imagination, whatever it is, once the movie ends, that fear will start to wear off, bringing you a sense of relief in the brain and in the nervous system.
Hmm.
And that's the excitation transfer. all of a sudden, like, you're all built up with this sense of anxiety that once it's done, it's like, oh, and you feel this sense of relaxation again. Even if it's not like so obvious, it is happening on some level within the body.
If you still don't get scared of stuff, things like that, it's still psychologically running that course.
Yes.
Which is
And
why it's relaxing.
exactly. And when the fear wears off, the brain gives you endorphins.
Yeah. So we're just like, horror movies are like drugs for us horror junkies.
Kind of. Yeah. It's very similar to any kind of adrenaline junkie situation. Like, it's really similar to roller coasters.
So even though we're like desensitized and it still doesn't like get us, our brain is probably still processing it the same. We're getting those endorphins, and that's why I love it. I love horror.
It's kind of like craving junk food, because you eat the junk food and your brain will produce the endorphins, creating a sense of craving. Like, you're really not craving that not nutritional food. Now, like the episode began, we saw some not so great benefits to watching horror. These people weren't just experiencing some endorphins releasing after watching a scary movie. A lot of them felt like they were kind of living it or very inspired by it. A lot of people would argue that horror is to blame. Media violence is the problem. And I think you would agree that is not the case.
Yeah, we've had violence since before media. Since the beginning of time, there has been violence.
Yeah, and people were like living around it. And I think a lot of it goes into the fact that these people we talked about were already very mentally ill.
Yeah.
They were already homicidal. They were using a lot of drugs while mentally ill. And I mean, also when I was researching crimes that happened based off horror films, there were a handful I didn't go into because I was either just really unfamiliar with the movie or because the crime didn't have a lot of info.
Oh, you should have done it anyways. I could have like brought you up to speed.
One of them, there were a few incidences that came from The Matrix, like mostly people having like psychotic breaks, not realizing reality.
Oh, thinking they were actually in a Matrix. I could see that.
Yes. And then The Purge inspired a few. It was mostly gang members who kind of used The Purge as an inspiration to create a mini Purge.
I could see that.
But it didn't get that much coverage or that much traction at all. But I feel like they're very isolated incidences. And of course, not to say that horror doesn't have negative effects, because it can, absolutely, which we can talk about right now.
We can.
So because of the adrenaline boosts that come from consuming horror content, it can actually lead to a lack of sleep for a lot of people, because it's just racking up this anxiety inside you. I mean, for some people, they might be scared because they just watched a scary movie and now it's all on their mind, which is keeping them up because they're hyper aware and they're like, oh my God, I heard a noise. Wow, I heard another noise. Oh my God, it must be Leatherface. Wait, that's not real. Or for other people, it's just that buildup of anxiety keeps their nervous system from relaxing, so they're not able to sleep. Studies, of course, show that a lack of sleep affects your mental and physical health, and especially if you're not doing mentally well already.
So is this why I stay up till 3 a.m.?
Honestly, perhaps.
Oh my gosh,
It
never...
It might be inside. Kind of like, if you can't sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night, people don't suggest to put on like some wild action or whatever. It's like, keep it on the news. Or put on that show that just, like for me, it's The Simpsons or something that I'm just like mindless to.
But that's interesting. I wonder if unconsciously...
something in your nervous system, just because or maybe because you find so much excitement in it. Like, I know for me, I couldn't like stay up watching Gaga music videos because I would be so excited watching them. I couldn't sleep.
I do that sometimes with music though too. Like, I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's like 3 a.m. I'm still watching these music videos.
Or very similar to the night before a trip. There's just so much happening in your nervous system. Obviously, it's not fear, it's excitement.
Yeah.
And you're not able to sleep. And even if it's not on your mind, it's on your nervous system.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, because they don't scare me. I don't think Leatherface is coming for me, or I don't have any fear in them. It's just maybe I'm racking that up all day. Subconsciously, not even thinking about it, because at this point I'm so desensitized, I don't It really,
Yeah,
it's got to be a different kind of horror to get me to where I'm
I
like,
know.
oh my God, like that freaked me out. Mostly like the psychological horrors is what gets me
Yeah.
now. But maybe I'm not even realizing what my brain has been processing and doing this whole time and is used to doing.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yes.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm at the therapist right now. Okay, go ahead.
The Halloween therapist.
Go ahead.
Of course, research also shows that short term exposure to violent themes in media can increase aggression in kids, teens, and young adults. And I feel like I feel like just the past century, we have seen that topic come up a lot in debates. It's a huge topic. A lot of people being against Halloween, a lot of people being against scary movies and haunted houses, and violent video games.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna
I
say
do
the video
feel,
games.
yeah, video games are kind of, I do want to touch on that, of course, but I do think that those are very different than watching scary movies. Now, of course, there are a lot of situations where people are obsessed with scary movies and violent video games, and I feel like the two together then can kind of work together, but I
See, I
do
like
feel,
both, so
oh, of course you do.
of course I do. It's not me playing Hitchhiker and Texas Chainsaw Massacre hours on end. Not little me.
Well, you're also an adult, and it's different in like a young kid.
Yeah.
Um, but what the research predominantly has shown is that the aggression that is seen in these children is usually something that's more like verbal and not physical. Or it's like extreme emotional responses, which of course is something that needs to be monitored and taken care of, but it's not necessarily creating serial killers either.
I think there's got to be some underlining emotional distress that goes along with that.
Yes.
Family violence, not such a good situation, maybe bullying at school, because raising my three boys, they've all grown up. I mean, it's their generation. They've all grown up playing video games.
Hmm.
Of course, for some of the games, like war games, like Call of Duty, things like this, where they're shooting and this and that, I did make them wait to like a certain age. Now,
Yeah.
did that kind of not continue as it got down to the first child is always raised the most strictest, and then the second child is kind of like, okay, and then the last child, you're like, "Oh, whatever, fine, it's fine." But they also watch me play a lot of video games that are probably not kid content, but I haven't seen any. I'm very lucky and very blessed that I have teenagers who are extremely respectful, come into the room and give me a hug, want to hang out with me, want to chit chat.
Hmm.
And same thing with my little, he wants to watch a movie, he wants to cuddle with me. So I do think the environment that they're in also plays a part to that
Yeah.
fantasy world, and that when they're playing a violent game, are they playing that violent game because they feel anger inside from the environment around them? So are they correlating it that way? Or are they correlating it in a way as this is fun and this is what my friends are playing? So I do think
Yeah.
it can go both ways. And maybe the same thing with horror movies. Like, are you watching the
Hmm.
horror movie because you have this sick sense of like you want to be that character and you want to see the kills and you want to think,
Like
live in that
Danny and Thomas.
fantasy? Yeah. Or are you watching it to escape? So I think those can go just kind of depending on your mental state,
Hmm.
your environmental state. I think that plays a huge impact on what
Yeah. That's why
violence
it's so
has.
hard, I think, to debate it because people can pull up studies of this and that. But at the end of the day, well, first of all, at the end of the day, we have seen that violence in media is not creating serial killers necessarily. Well, I think
So,
that's the other thing is anyone who wants to get rid of horror or violence in media, first of all, the news itself is terrifying.
it's
Discussions of
all
war
violence.
and fires and shootings,
Hmm.
that's scary. It's horrible and that's real.
Yeah. And we don't even think about it.
Well, and
Well,
if it's okay to report that, why is it not okay to watch Scream?
I think there's some things also with the mental unstable, which I was going to
Yeah.
talk about with Scream. So Scream, I think, is a little bit different because of the satire throughout the movie. It's very kind of upbeat, and the characters are funny. And you actually, a lot of people that really like Stu. I like Stu. And then, spoiler alert, at the end, you're like, oh, Stu is a killer. Great.
Hmm.
I think if you're not mentally stable and you're watching the fun of Scream, it can
Yeah.
give you this delusion that being a killer is going to be this fun and exciting thing that you can just live amongst your friends and stuff and be doing these things behind the scenes. So I can see
And the
why,
predominance of those Scream inspired crimes were teenagers.
yeah, so I could
And
see that.
yeah. And yeah, I think the sense of whimsy to it
Yeah.
and the fact that there's this unseriousness. Even the people in like getting killed are very like they're making fun of the whole situation as it's happening around them.
Yeah, they're having that like big house party
Yeah. And if
when,
you're already, like we keep mentioning, already mentally unwell and
mhm.
in not stable state or, have which comes from so many different things on its own, then you see that it can kind of trigger something. But I would definitely say it's not Scream's fault at
Yeah.
all because you have to have the perfect kind of circumstantial experience to have that type of effect, as we just saw that, these are all very isolated incidents, and I don't think that they can speak necessarily to the horror genre itself.
And if you're thinking about even the movie Scream, it's not an original idea. If we go back to the Gainesville Ripper, he didn't get the idea from watching the movie Scream. He was just actually a
Cool.
sick individual who decided to do all these crimes.
Yeah,
So,
and most serial killers are not inspired by a scary movie.
yeah, so we
They're
can't
inspired by
say
circumstances in their childhood.
exactly. So if we're to say Scream inspired these killings, then what inspired the Gainesville Ripper? He
Hmm.
wasn't watching these things. He was just doing horrific things on his own.
Exactly.
Again, he had a lot going on mentally there. I think the movies can put people that aren't ready for it in a fantasy state. I don't think it's the movie's fault. I think those people need psychiatric help. I think there's probably
Hmm.
people in their life that realize they need help. And again, environmental. Maybe their parents do not care about their mental state of health and laugh it off as a joke. It's a lot of things that add up. It's kind of like a piece of the puzzle at the end of the day. It's
Yeah,
not the whole picture, it's a small piece of the puzzle that plays an effect, is how
yeah.
I see
Well,
it.
and it's like that cliche of, oh, you've always got the bad apple.
Yeah.
However, for a lot of people with anxiety, it helps them. And that was something that I found very interesting that I kind of wanted to talk about because I have a lot of anxiety and watching something spooky will relax me. And even something as simple as like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which isn't like scary, but it has
Hmm.
scary type of themes, vampires and monsters and she's killing them and whatnot.
Fight
And
scenes.
yeah, so something even as simple as that, it's like, oh, okay, the spookiness, it's relaxing. But I have friends who anything spooky, anything will make them so anxious. It's so interesting to me that they respond that way versus the way that I respond. But like in 1999, after people watched the Blair Witch Project, 90% of US college students refused to go camping, specifically afraid after seeing that movie.
That movie, genius marketing, because when it came out, we all thought that was real when we were
Yeah.
watching that in theater. But going to the theater, I remember I went to the theater in 1999 or whenever that came out, and I saw it in theater, and it was just like we thought we were watching real footage. They set that up so well with the missing poster campaigns.
Mhm.
And so I see the fear behind that, especially since a lot of people for a long time really were like, no, that really happened.
Yeah. Well, and this definitely didn't happen. But after people saw Jaws, they were afraid to go not only into ocean, but in lakes and swimming pools.
Is that a rational fear too? Is when you're a child and you're in the swimming pool and you're like, keep looking down like you're
Yeah.
going to see a shark or
I mean,
something.
I'm nervous of swimming pools because I'm like, there could be a snake in there.
No, I've always thought something stupid like a shark or a piranha. I
I
think
literally have swam with snakes in a pool multiple times. That's why I'm scared, but not because of Jaws.
No.
But then also, when The Exorcist was released in theaters, people ran out vomiting and crying and were fainting
Yeah.
at the theater. And like, so obviously there are those people who it just makes them too anxious and it doesn't serve them.
Yeah, and you still hear that in today's movies that come out, that it was the scariest movie ever and people were having to leave the theater and vomit and stuff. So I think they use that to kind of project that, oh, this movie's going to be scary. But I think it's only like a certain type of people that shouldn't
Right,
have
exactly.
watched the movie, but they were there anyways.
Yes. Now, another thing that I kind of wanted to note was, as a very spiritual person, a lot of people within spiritual communities are always shocked by my love of the macabre. And they're like, God, like you're just opening portals to darkness. And I'm like, first of all, no. Second of all, so what? Like, I feel like I consume horror in a smart way. And like, I understand my body well enough. And there are spiritual people who have mentioned how it's helping you manifest real horrors in life, where I would argue that it's helping you process things, that there's even like a philosophical experience happening with horror. Or I even recently, this Halloween, I was seeing reels and TikToks of people complaining about scary type of decorations like zombies and werewolves in your front yard. And they were like, why would you celebrate this? We have kids in the neighborhood. I get that, but I don't think it's our job to not do what we want because your kids weren't taught that werewolves aren't real.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, I don't think we should shut down an entire holiday for that, because you have people who have irrational phobias of, I don't know, a banana, but we don't, like grocery stores don't stop selling bananas. But I do also want to know, because I just went into a little bit of the negative parts of horror, some of the benefits. So like I was saying, anxiety, some people with anxiety, horror just makes them worse. But for others, it helps people feel better. And I thought, okay, are we crazy? Like, why is Scream relaxing me? And there are factors to that.
It's my comfort movie.
It is mine as well now, too. So it's most likely because it can give a sense of control over that anxious feeling. So if you're already feeling anxiety and the horror film is making you feel a little anxious, you can feel what you're already feeling, but through a sense of control, because you know it's fake. You know watching a movie. It also helps to capture your attention. You become immersed with the terror that's happening on the screen. So you're all like honed in on what's happening there, opposed to focusing on overthinking and being anxious and not in your body. So the horror film actually helps keep you present and not trapped in your head with anxiety.
It's a good distraction away from overthinking. Yeah.
And it can also potentially help with resilience to what we already fear. So it's kind of helping us gauge and figure out how to respond to scary experiences. I had someone tell me that, while really stressed out, they can watch a scary movie and be like, well, things suck right now, but at least I'm not that girl in that movie.
Exactly. At least I'm not her. At least I didn't run up the stairs.
Yeah, at least I didn't go, who's there? And then walk into the closet.
Right.
Now, fun fact, horror can actually help you burn calories.
That's why I'm semi-skinty.
So it gets your heart rate going and the adrenaline pumping. And a study showed that people burnt 200 calories while watching The Shining. And fun fact, they believe that it can even strengthen our immune system.
Oh, see, I'm hardly ever sick either. There we go. I still don't leave the house, so that...
Well, that's maybe
why. But... let's not digress.
There are also a lot of studies that show that it's a really great bonding experience. And when you watch something scary with someone, you're kind of subconsciously tying yourself to them. Again, your mind knows what's happening. Your nervous system and your body do not. So your subconscious and nervous system are kind of associating that person with survival now.
Oh, interesting.
Because your body just went through that experience with the scary movie and kind of feels like it just survived. And now we'll associate that person with that survival, creating bonding. So first dates are actually, it's really good to see a scary movie or go to a haunted house or do anything spooky with somebody that you're dating or interested in because it can actually help strengthen bonds.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way, ever.
Yeah, I never thought of that either.
Huh.
So I know I just took you on kind of a whirlwind of a lot of different things, from benefits to disadvantages, horror film history and psychology, and crimes.
You
But that is
did.
what I have for you.
You covered it all. So, to be honest, when you first started, I was like, I have no idea where this is going. Is he about to talk about mental health? Is he about to talk about the
That would have been
injustice
super
of the
great.
prison system? I was like, where is this going? I was so confused on how you were going to tie this all together, but you did beautifully.
Thank you.
Horror movies, of course, are a topic that I love to discuss. I could have yapped on for
We yapped a lot,
we did.
which I think is good because
Yeah.
I think this episode needed banter. And I think this can also be a good transition into showing people our bantery side.
I do too.
But I do think a lot of the banter will help on this one because it's kind of showcasing us to people who don't already know us in a new way. Also, this is our first kind of like personal episode.
Yeah, it really is. Usually we just kind of discuss a case or, a topic and just only discuss that specific subject where we don't really have much feeling about it or perspective of our own to fill in because we're not murderers and we've never been abducted by aliens. So we can't really give like our own perspective other than a guesstimation. Loved it.
I loved doing the research for this one. There was more I wanted to go into, but I was like, you already have a lot of different pieces to get into, so just kind of keep it maybe a little more generic. There were some other things with like negative benefits I was going to kind of touch on, but it all felt just kind of like general stats.
It's different than what we usually do as well. I appreciate you putting the subject out there.
Well, I was inspired by Scream. Well, that's it.
That is it.
Everyone go watch a scary movie. Unless you're like mentally ill and homicidal, in which case don't.
I guess with that,
we'll say goodnight.
And pleasant nightmares.
Bye.
Bye.